Welcome back to the In All Things Give Thanks Pillow Along. We are on week 3. Today we're going to work on our star blocks, the big turkey and the little turkey. I'm going to go in order of the instructions. We'll work on the turkey blocks first and then the star blocks. We're going to need fusible backing, light mesh cutaway, and wash away topping. I've got all my blocks prepared. We're going to go through these really quick because I've shown these before. For turkey number 1, this is the big turkey. You want to cut a piece of batting 9.5 by 5.5, and you have fusible only on your background fabric. Turkey 2 is the small turkey. Cut a 5.5-inch square piece of batting, fusible on your background fabric. For the star blocks, we're going to make 2 of these. Cut 2 7.5-inch squares of batting. No fusible on these. I'm keeping all the parts separate. We're going to build this block in the hoop, sew it together, and then quilt it. But we'll do the star blocks last. Let's get started on our turkey blocks. We'll do turkey 1, which is the bigger turkey first. I'm using an 8 by 12 hoop. I have my light mesh cutaway loaded, hand tightened, screwdriver tightened. Let's head over to the machine. I'm on a baby lock meridian. Files are on USB. We need 2 files for the turkey. We want the background quilting KDQ 239 Autumn 5 4x8 vertical design. Go ahead and set that, and now we're going to add our turkey. We're ready to go. We've done all of these steps before. I'm going to go ahead and set the first part to music all the way through the background quilting because we've done that before on previous videos. We will build the turkey together. I'm going to show you my background fabric that I'll be using, and for my quilting I'm going to use this color. It's the one I have pulled, I believe, for either light brown or medium brown. I'm going to use this instead of the tan for my quilting. You'll see me do the batting placement, batting tack down, trim the batting, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting, and then I'll stop and we'll start working on the turkey together. The background quilting is done. We're going to start working on the turkey. In the instructions it says to use a neutral thread. I'm going to leave this brown thread on. Most of the fabrics I'm going to be working with for the feathers are dark. It's not going to matter. The first thing we're going to stitch out is the tail piecing template. The piecing template has stitched. That was interesting. I expected it just to go to the end and stop, but it went all the way to the end and it went back and forth a few times. It's very easy to see each one of these feathers. We're going to start on section 1. Section 1 is right here, the closest one to you. So as we go, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. You should have a fabric picked out for your section 1. So feather number 1. We want to completely cover this section 1. So feather number 1, that looks good. It's not going to stitch all the way around. It's just going to stitch a trimming and placement line. This line has stitched. We want to trim the fabric that's on this side. So this fabric here needs to get trimmed off. I've got that extra fabric trimmed. You want to grab your feather 2 fabric, place the long edge along this line, go ahead and center it along that line. Make sure it's right sides together, so right side down on this one. I'm going to add a piece of tape just in case. Slide this back on my machine, and it's going to stitch a seam. There's your seam. I need to take the tape off. Now you can take this to your ironing board if you like and press it. You can finger press it, use your fingernail like that, which seems to work really well. If you've got something like this, this is a clover seam roller. I use this a lot. Just make sure that you're on the bed of your machine, you're not off your machine, because then you'll wreck your stabilizer and your hoop. That's all nice and pressed. I'm going to slide this back on my machine, stitch the trimming and placement line. Trim away this fabric right here. Grab your fabric 3, place that centered along that line, just like before. Got my same piece of tape here. I'm going to go ahead and tape that down just in case. We'll stitch the seam. If you use tape, take the tape off, flip it, press it, and then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. Trim this fabric off. I've got my fabric 4, same thing. Center it along that line, tape it if you like, and stitch the seam. We're going to do the same thing for all of the feathers. I'll go ahead and work through the rest of the feathers. It's very repetitive. I'll set that to music, so you'll go all the way to the end, and then we'll work on the turkey body together. That's where you're either using embroidery leather, I'll be using felt, we'll be working with the wash away topping. We've stitched down our last feather. We can go ahead and flip this over. We're going to stitch an outline that's going to go around all of the feathers. Before I stitch that outline, I am going to take this over to my ironing board. I want to give all of these feathers a nice press, make sure they're lying nice and flat. This is all nice and pressed. We're going to stitch out the tail tack down line. Tack down line is stitched. I definitely recommend pressing this before this tack down line. As it went this way, the fabric is folded in the correct direction, but when it goes around the middle, if these pieces here aren't pressed down really well, your presser foot can catch that really easily. You want to trim everything outside of that tail tack down line. All my little feathers are trimmed. We're going to stitch the satin outline. Don't worry if this part right here isn't completely clean looking. Remember, we've got the body of the turkey that's going to go right there. So these raw edges are going to end up covered. Going to leave your medium brown on the machine and stitch the turkey body placement line. If you're using the embroidery leather, grab your piece of embroidery leather. I'm using felt. You want to cover that turkey body placement line. Make sure you've got everything covered, and then we're going to stitch the turkey body tack down, and then you'll want to trim everything outside of the tack down line. My turkey's all trimmed. I'm going to use the wash away topping. I used this last time over the felt and I got a great result with that. Going to tape it all the way around. You definitely want the wash away topping if you're working with the embroidery leather. It doesn't have to lie completely flat because you're going to tear away the extra, wash away the extra. Next, we're going to stitch the turkey body decorative outline. Switch to red, we're going to stitch the turkey waddle. Switch to yellow and stitch out the beak. Switch to black and stitch out the eyes. Everything is stitched out. We went over removing the wash away topping last time. I'll just pull it off since I'm sitting right here. So you can tear off your wash away, go all the way around, tear off anything on the inside, and whatever doesn't pull off easily, use a wet cotton swab, spray it with water, damp Kleenex, whatever you need to get the rest of that wash away off, and set this aside. We'll trim all our blocks at the end. We're going to work on the small turkey, which is done the same way, so we'll work through that one a little bit quicker. Let's load our file for turkey 2. This one has one little step on it that's different. I'll make sure to slow down and show that. For our background, we're going to use KDQ 240 Thanksgiving 2 4x4. Select the block by block, 4x4, and then add your turkey. One thing I do notice, this block says give thanks. It's sideways, but do you see how the turkey's going to cover it so it doesn't matter? I have a 5x7 hoop for this one. I'm going to go all the way through the background quilting and then I'll stop after that. This time I'm going to do my background quilting in the color I'm using for tan. Here's the part that's different about this block. Once you've stitched your background quilting, switch to black thread and it's going to stitch out little turkey legs and feet. Put your black thread on, stitch that out. Got the little tiny turkey legs and feet. The next part is just like the big turkey. It does say to use a neutral thread. I'm going to go right to the medium brown like I did last time. All of these steps are exactly the same. This turkey has 6 feathers, so you'll do the 6 feathers like you did before. Have the body outline, put down your topping on top of your leather or your felt, and then stitch all the details. I'm going to set the rest of this block to music because it's exactly like what what we just did. You'll notice after you stitch the eyes, there's a little line on your machine. Don't stitch that out. That's a design placement line. You don't need that. I need to take off the tape, get rid of the wash away topping. There's a little jump thread between the eyes. I'll set this aside and we're going to start on our star blocks. We're going to make our star blocks. We need to make 2 of these. Something of note, it lets you know that the D and the E, we don't use these until we get to the end when we piece it together. In our hoop, we're going to make the square and a square and the flying geese. Then we're going to sew everything together. That's when we're going to use the corners, the D's and the E's. And after this block is sewn together, we do the quilting. We're going to start here. We're going to do the square and a square first. It's a little confusing because when you cut your fabric, you have star block A, here's my fabric for that, and star block B. This doesn't mean star block A is the first star block and star block B is the second star block, which is what I was thinking when I cut everything. And then you end up with star block C, D, and E, and it got really confusing. So you only make 2 of these. And if you look really close at the picture here at the top, this is on page 30, you can see all the components are labeled. The center portion is what they're calling A. We've got B here and here. C is over here and over here. And then D and E are the corners. At the beginning, I mentioned to cut the batting for a 7.5 inch square for your star blocks. Set this aside. We don't need this right now. We're going to quilt these after they're all put together. You should have your fabrics for star block A. This is where we're going to start. And when we look at the picture, A1 is our square. We've got A2, A3, A4, A5. I have all my pieces labeled. 2 of these fit in my 8x12 hoop. Let's go ahead and load our stabilizer and head over to the machine. Let's load our file for the center part of our star block. We need the 4x4, they call it star, square, something. It's running off the screen there, but that's the one that you want. I'm going to want another one of these. I'm going to hit edit, and I'm going to use the border duplicate key. When you use this key instead of the regular duplicate key, it'll perform the same action on each block at the same time. If you duplicate with this button here, it will complete one and then complete another. When you do the border duplicate key, it'll do step 1, step 1, step 2, step 2. We're going to use that one today. I'm going to add it underneath. I'm going to move this toward the center, give myself a little bit of space, as much as I can without it telling me I need a bigger hoop. That looks like it's going to be right about there. You can look at the top, you can see my biggest hoop is available and my next to the biggest hoop is available. That's the one I want to use. That's going to be my 8x12. I'm going to save this to my machine and we're ready to start. Put a neutral thread on your machine for this. The first thing that's going to stitch out is called a piecing template. Grab your A1 fabric, and I've got 2 of these. You have your diamond here, your square that's tilted. Place your fabric like that. I'm going to grab my tape. I'm going to add a piece of tape. I don't want this moving. This piece here, make sure you've got that little square cover. And then we're going to stitch a trimming and placement line. It looks like it's going to stitch over here. We want to trim everything on this side of that trimming and placement line. You should have some A2 fabric. We're going to place that centered along that line like we were just doing with the turkey. It's the same concept, and it's going to stitch a seam. I'm going to take the tape off, flip and press. I'm going to do the same thing with these blocks that I did with the turkey block. I'm just going to finger press, use my little roller, and then before we do the quilting on these, I will give them a good press with the iron. We're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. Trim everything on that side of the line. You should have a piece of fabric, your A3 fabric, right side down, centered along that line, and then we'll stitch the seam. Once that seam has stitched, we're going to flip and press. And then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. You might have seen my hands come in. I'm stopping my machine and I added a little piece of tape there and one up here to hold this nice and flat. Press your pieces before you start. I'm having to add tape because all my pieces are wrinkled. We're going to trim everything right here that's outside of that stitch line. Grab your A4 fabric. If you cut your fabric according to the directions, you've got the same fabric here and here, and then here and here. You could also do this with all different fabrics and make it completely patchwork. Once those are placed, we're going to stitch the seam. We want to flip and press these, same steps again, and then we're going to stitch another trimming and placement line after you've got these flipped and pressed. We want to trim everything on this side of the line. I've got those trimmed. Last piece of fabric here, centered along that placement line, and we're going to stitch the seam. After that, we're going to flip and press. I'm going to do that on my iron because we're going to stitch something that's going to go all the way around the block. So heat up your iron if your iron's not on. This is all done. I'm going to flip these and press everything on my iron. If you've been using tape, take off the tape before you iron. This is paper tape. It will burn. It turns brown and it smells. Guess how I know that? So make sure your paper tape is all removed. Go give this a good press and then we'll come back for the final step. All pressed. What a difference. They actually look nice, don't they? They're nice and neat. We are going to stitch the outer tack down line. It's going to go around the squares. One thing I'm looking at, I'm going to hand crank my needle down here really quick. It looks like I might catch these two corners here. What I'm doing is taping this one out of the way. I'm going to stitch the top one and then stop my machine. Now I can look and see where I can trim fabric. Anything outside this line I'm not going to need. I'm not going to trim it nice and neat. I just want to get some of it out of the way. We'll trim these later, and then I can take these, take the tape off, and place them up top. A little bit of that would have got caught. You see that top corner? That would have gotten caught in that block. This part is done. I'm going to set these aside, trim them at the end. We'll do all the trimming and assembly together. For the next step, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're making 2 blocks. So we need 8. Let's see how many we can fit into one hooping. I can fit 8 in one hooping. I can actually fit 9, but I don't want to make 9. So we're going to do 8 because we only need 4 per block. 4x4 star triangle. We're going to set 1. The first thing I want to do is rotate it. This makes them fit better for my hoop. Slide it over. Hit OK. I'm going to use my border duplicate key again. Side to side. I'm going to add one to the side. This button here will stretch them out. The arrow's pointing out. I can actually get a little more space. Let's go all the way out. So now I have 2. Hit the up and down. 4, 6, 8. I want to stretch them out. I'm going to maximize the space in my hoop. There's going to be a lot of those trimming lines, placement lines, that kind of thing. So I don't want to have to worry about my fabric running over each of the blocks. There's my 8. I'm going to hit OK. Save it to my machine. Let's hit embroidery and look at how this is going to stitch out. Do you see that? Step 1, 8 times. So it's going to stitch 8 of these. That's why I use that border duplicate key. I need to load some stabilizer in my big hoop, and then we're going to need our fabrics for star block B and C. The first thing that's going to stitch out is the piecing template, and it's going to stitch out 8 of these. Here we go. Just in case anybody else is having this problem, I figured out where the thread is breaking. When it starts, it goes around and it stitches this line, and it comes around and it goes up on this line here again, and then it hits the top and goes down this way. Right when it hits the top is when my thread's breaking every time. So if you stop, and start and go through it slow, just that point right there, usually the thread doesn't break. All 8 of my piecing templates are finally stitched out. We're going to start with piece B1 or C1. I'm going to put my pieces that are B up on top and C at the bottom. I've got one of my C1 pieces and it has us covering the center triangle. Remember, I rotated mine. So not the outside triangles, the center triangle. It says make sure it's right side up over section 1. Here's our diagram. Section 1. I need to rotate this. These are on my machine like this. So section 1 is going to be on the right hand side for me. Got my fabric. Here's section 1. I need to make sure I'm covering that. I do want to tape this. I don't want this to move. The stitch line is going to go this way. These are my B1s and my C1s. Let's go ahead and stitch our first trimming and placement lines. We need to trim the little piece right here outside of the stitch line on all of our blocks. These are all trimmed. I'm going to reuse my pieces of tape. B2 fabric, right side down, centered along that line, and then I want to tape that in place. I'm glad I didn't pick directional fabrics. This would be really confusing. Once you've got these placed and taped, we're going to stitch the seam. I plugged my iron back in. Having to finger press all of these will take more time than it will for me to pull this off my hoop and press it. Let's stitch our seam. That's all stitched. If you've taped these down, make sure to take off the tape, flip, and press. Next, we're going to stitch trimming and placement lines on all our blocks. We need to trim everything on that side of that line. Once you've got these trimmed, we're going to place our B3 and C3 fabrics, which are the same. And they're also the same as B4 and C4, at least the way I cut them. So I don't have to worry about getting confused on which piece of fabric to use. You're going to place these right side down, center it along those stitch lines, and then we'll stitch the seams. Once all your seams have stitched, take off any tape, and then we're going to flip these and press these. I'm going to take it over to my ironing board. These are all pressed. We're going to stitch our next trimming and placement line. Trim everything outside the line, just like before. The same thing we did on this side, we're now doing on this side. So you'll trim all of that away, and then you'll take your B4 and C4 fabrics, lay them down, tape them, stitch the seam. The seams are all stitched. Same thing we did as the last time. Pick off any of your tape. Definitely press these. If you're finger pressing, take this to your ironing board this time. Give everything a good press, because the last step is that stitching line that goes all the way around, so you don't want any wrinkles in your little blocks. These are all pressed. The last step is the outer tack down line. We're all done with these. We're going to head over to the cutting table. We're over at the cutting table. I want to get these out of the hoop. I'm going to start with these since they're what's in front of me. The first thing I'm going to do is separate them. That'll make it easier to measure them and trim them. These need to be trimmed to 2 inches by 3.5 inches. I have a 3.5 inch square ruler. 3.5 is this part of it, the long part, and it does trim right on the stitching. You almost don't even need to measure because you're trimming right on these stitching lines. And if you trim right on the stitch lines, it should come out 2 by 3.5. Let's trim this first one together. There's the 3.5. If I measure stitching line to stitching line, it's 2 inches. All you have to do is get a ruler and stitch right on those lines. Now this part here has a lot of bulk because that's where all your seams are overlapping. Make sure you're holding down your ruler really secure. There's not an orange pop ruler this size. There's one. I need to do this for 7 more of the little blocks. I've got all these trimmed. I'm going to set them aside. I need to get these out of the hoop. These blocks need to be trimmed to 3.5 inches square. I can use my 3.5 inch square ruler. I'm going to grab my little mini rotating cutting mat. That'll make this easier. I got this little guy at Fat Quarter Shop. It's called a Kimberly Cuts 5.5 inch rotating cutting mat. I do not have any affiliation with Fat Quarter Shop. I do shop there quite a bit, especially during sales. If you're watching these videos as they're posting, everybody's doing early Black Friday sales. So if you want to stock up on things, now's the time. All your pieces together, your trimmed flying geese, the trimmed square and a square, star piece E, star piece D. We're going to make 2 star blocks. They're the same essentially, just rotated. Do you see that? See the corners here are the same as here. These corners are the same as these corners. The square and a square is the same. They just rotate it. I'm going to do both at the same time. So see how the orange check is here, and on this block it's here and here. I'm going to grab a couple of these, point them in toward the center. Oh, these will fit on this board. And then on this side, point them that direction. All I'm doing is looking at this and kind of copying the picture. See how they've got white, 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 white. So I've got the whites, or cream, whatever you want to call it. You get the idea. And then the other one has the yellow at the top. Yellow, yellow, and then on this side they're going to be here, like that. I'm going to spread these out a little bit. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine to assemble it. So it'll be helpful if I have a little bit of space in between. Now you have your corner pieces. This is star piece D. On one block, I'll place it top left, bottom right, and then on the other block, top right, bottom left, and then all that's left is your star piece E. I'm not sure if that's correct per the diagram. I'm just looking at the picture. Go ahead and place these. My blocks are ready to go. You sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It does say to press the seams open. I like to nest my seams. I'll sew these pieces together and then probably press them out, and these together, and then press in, these together, and press out. That way when I put my rows together, all the seams will nest. I'll go sew these together and I'll show you the back of the blocks. Here's my 2 blocks. Here's the back. You can see I sewed the rows first. This row, this row, this row. Pressed out, pressed in, pressed out. That allowed my seams to nest. And then I just pressed this part going out. I don't like to press open with the stabilizer. Sometimes my iron gets really hot. I've melted the stabilizer before. I'm going to take a pin and just mark the top of these because I need to move this and get it over to my embroidery machine. That way I remember where the top of the block is. You can see that they're not sewn together perfectly. I didn't worry so much about matching up the points. It's a pillow. I'm not worried about it. Unless you get really, really close, you're not going to see that things don't match up perfectly. Now we need to do the quilting for this. We're going to use a 6.5 inch square quilting file. I'm going to grab my 8 inch square hoop for that and put some stabilizer in this. And then you need to grab your batting. Remember we set aside our batting 7.5 inches square. So hoop some stabilizer, grab your batting, and you'll have your blocks, and take that over to your machine. It has us using the same quilting file for both blocks. We need the KDQ 239 Autumn 5 6x6 horizontal design. That's this one right here. That's all we're going to need. I'm going to use my medium brown thread for this. It has us using the lighter brown, the tan color, but I like the way this looks better stretched across my fabric. If you're never sure about picking threads for quilting, just open up your thread like this, lay it down on your block and see what it looks like. This looks better to me on the fabric. I'm going to put this on my machine. We have 2 blocks, so you have to do this twice. I'll just film for one. We're going to start with our batting placement line. Grab your batting, cover your batting placement line, and then stitch the batting tack down line. Trim off the excess batting, and then once you have that trimmed, we're going to stitch out the fabric placement line. You're going to grab one of your star blocks, and you'll notice it's going to be an exact fit. That's the only thing I don't like about the way this kind of block is done. I don't have any 505 spray. If you've got 505 basting spray, you can try that, but I found that the basting spray doesn't stick well to the stabilizer. I have tried a glue stick. It actually didn't really work well for me. I'm going to put some tape around my block. You can see the tape. I've got it almost all the way around. I try to tape it as close to the edge as possible because if I get 1/4 of an inch or less, I don't have to worry about picking off the tape. It'll get sewn into the project and it won't matter. We're going to stitch the fabric tack down line, and I'm pretty sure there are parts of this block that aren't even, like right here, this square is short. It's probably not even going to get caught in the tack down line. The fabric tack down line here, it caught the tape. It's not even touching my fabric most of the way around. We're going to quilt it, so it really doesn't matter, and it's going to get sewn into the piece. You just want to make sure you're watching this as it goes. This looks like it's going to quilt across and back and go down, and then across and back and go down. You want to keep an eye on your presser foot, make sure that all your hard work you did on your block doesn't get messed up. It's all done quilting. My machine did get caught right here. There's a lot of bulk right here and it got stuck on that seam. I don't see it as a problem. I don't think there was part of the design or anything that got distorted to the point where it's going to look bad or that anybody's going to notice. I'm going to take this off my machine. We'll trim these together. I'm going to do my second block off camera, and then when that's done, we'll trim all of our blocks. It's time to trim our blocks. The first block is our big turkey, turkey 1. The instructions have us using 2 different sizes of orange pop rulers. I've done this before on another project. I find it honestly just a bit confusing. We're going to trim this to 8.5 by 4.5. I have a ruler that's 8.5 inches wide. I'm going to trim my 8.5 side, and then I'll trim the 4.5 side. We do have an orange pop ruler just the right size. That's nice. It's always easier when the rulers are exactly the right size. Line that up, and I showed how to use these last time. Grab another one because it's bigger. It'll help you place your hands and hold the ruler steady. 4.5 inches square. Let's trim our little turkey. Our star blocks are going to trim to 6.5 inches square. That's the middle ruler for the square set of orange pop rulers, so we can use that one. I've got everything trimmed. Before we take a final look at everything, let's take a peek at what we'll be doing next week. Next week we'll work on the filler blocks. We're going to assemble our pillow, and I'm going to try and come up with some alternate layout ideas in case you don't want to make a pillow. You can already start thinking about that. How do you come up with alternate layout ideas? One thing you can do, since you have a few blocks done now, is start looking at how the blocks go together, how things fit. You would need a filler block here. Maybe you like these 2 blocks. You like the little turkey block. You could put some strips next to it. That could make a 4-patch. You could make a bigger quilt. You can think about which blocks you really enjoyed making. Maybe you love making the big turkey, but found the star block to be a little bit of a pain in the patootie. So you want to make a bunch of big turkeys. You could make turkeys like this. This could actually trim. If you put a little bit of border on this too, you could have a star block in the center. A turkey, a turkey, a turkey, and a turkey. That would make a really nice centerpiece, wouldn't that? And you could put a bowl or a candle on that, and then you'd have the little turkeys going around it. Just play with your blocks, see what you can come up with. I have my filler blocks cut already to the instructions. They're ready to go. I haven't looked yet to see if we need fusible. I have a border fabric, the flange fabric, and a backing fabric. So I have everything ready to go. Thank you for joining me for another week of the In All Things Give Thanks Pillow Along. We're getting there. Next week we'll be finishing our project. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss a thing. I have some really fun, unique projects in the works. One is already filmed. I've started editing. Another one I'm going to start working on today. Thanks for staying until the end. I'm so excited. We're going to finish this next week. See you next time.